the desegregation decisions and other type of legislation and Supreme Court decisions depends upon changing the white man's mind. The Honorable Elijah Muhammad teaches us that our own mind has to be changed. We have to change our mind about ourselves.
In what way?
Well, so he teaches us the importance of moral reformation, a knowledge of self. And for instance, the average so-called Negro, he doesn't think that he can go into business and provide jobs for himself. And because of this, he thinks that he can only get a job from the white man, or he can only get clothes from the white man, or he can only get food from the white man. And we who follow the Honorable Elijah Muhammad are taught that the same thing that the white man has done for himself and his kind, if our people could if we could be cured of our slave mentality that was indoctrinated into us during slavery, we would realize that just as the white man can do these things for himself and his kind, we can get together in unity and harmony and do the same thing for ourselves and our kind. White man.
Hello family, this is African Esquire and I'm here with a new video. So again, part one of this video was in regard to the AFCFTA, the agreement, the African Continental Free Trade Area Agreement that has now been ratified officially in Africa, thanks to Gambia being the 22nd country to join in on this agreement. This agreement has positive implications because it would basically create a major incentive for the African countries to trade with each other instead of trade with outsiders, be they Europe or the US. So just to run through again, some of the major benefits. It was enacted last year and it creates the largest trade zone in the world, increases intra-Africa trade by 52% by the year 2022, and removes tariffs on 90% of goods, which would be a major reason for African countries to start trading with each other instead of trading with outsiders, trading with Europe, trading with China. And it's very necessary because everyone is trying to basically get whatever they can from Africa right now. It's necessary to create an incentive for Africans to trade with each other. Now, I want to talk about the other aspect of this. This is the diaspora. We have to understand that us in the diaspora, so whether you're in the Caribbean, whether you're in the US, whether you're in Europe, wherever you are, some of us have different reasons why we are different places, but regardless of that, we are all African people. Some of us are there by slavery, some of us by immigration, doesn't matter. We're all African people. And as African people, we can never truly be free. Never truly have control over ourselves or destiny when Africa is in chains. So anything positive happening on the continent of Africa is something positive for us. If the Africans people on the continent are saying we're going to start trading with each other, that has positive implications for us. Now, is it a complete victory? No, these are still neo-colonial governments. These are still governments that are being ran by puppets. These are still governments that have a lot of corruption, a lot of European, American, Chinese influence going on behind the scenes. And the ultimate solution is self-determination on the continent of Africa, which will look like the people of Africa taking control over their own resources, over the land, the goods, the mineral wealth, all of these things, taking control over those things and not allowing their leaders. You know, we're told democracy is this great thing, but democracy doesn't necessarily work the same in Africa as it does everywhere. And it certainly might not just be good for African people, because what it has resulted in is a very weak civilian population and a very strong president, executive branch, who has not just taken power to execute laws, but has taken power to create policies, taken power to exploit people, taking power to make decisions that have nothing to do with the people. This is what democracy has done to Africa. So all of these are negative implications that we have to deal with. But despite that, the fact that the consciousness of African people is growing to where they're realizing that united, we stand a better chance, that we have to stop trying to trade with Europe all the time, stop trying to trade with the US, and we have to trade with each other. These are very, very positive signs. if you understand what progress really is, progress is not something like it just happens at one time. Like, it happens continually. And particularly when it comes to consciousness, when it comes to us moving forward, the fact that we get to a point where we're no longer okay with certain things, that's a great sign of consciousness growing. The fact that for a number of African leaders, they decided that we're no longer okay accepting things from Europe that are not or China that are not even of quality, and instead we want to push for trade among ourselves. That's a positive thing. These are great things. And that's a result of consciousness growing. Understand the idea that the African Union is pushing, United States of Africa. That seed was planted a long time ago by Kwame Nkrumah when he stated that we need a united Africa. He stated that decades ago. And we're just now seeing his idea come into fruition. Powerful stuff. So here we are in diaspora. As I stated, once Africa is free, that has implications not just for Africans on the continent, but Africans throughout the world. And we have to think similarly. In that scenario, how could we navigate? How could we benefit from a African trade agreement where you have these type of trade things happening? Now, this is why, while Africa is getting their stuff together, and we encourage it, we unite with them, we have solidarity with them, but we also have to organize ourselves and be ready. Not just focus on what's going on over there, but focus also what's going on in the US, in the Caribbean, in different places. So it's called walking and chewing gum at the same time. A lot of ADOS people, with their criticism of my criticisms of the movement have been, well, we just need to focus on America right now and let Africa focus on Africa. And my answer has always been, you can walk and chew gum at the same time. If you can tweet something about reparations in the United States and you happen to see something about, something that's going on, some corruption that's going on in Africa, you can tweet that too. It's called walking and chewing gum at the same time. If you want to speak out against something that's going on in the US and you also see something's going on in Haiti, you see something's going on in Jamaica, you can still be a voice to those things. And if you're on an organization level where you're actually in a position to inflict policy, to actually do things, you can certainly take on something in the diaspora, whatever country you live in, and to also take on something that's going on the continent by being supportive, by giving, by spreading consciousness about these issues, and by giving support and solidarity. But there is a part, as I stated, like walk and chew gum at the same time. So the walking has to be that we have to get organized where we are. And by organized, we have to turn our minds and our hearts towards being a sovereign people in the sense of having self-determination. Self-determination sounds so, whoa, what is that? But all it is saying that we need control over our communities. We need control over ourselves. We need control over our governance. We need control over all the things that affect us from day to day. And it's happened so many times throughout history where we were able to be in a position of self-determination. So, for example, if you look at history, you look at movements such as post Jim Crow, I believe, and also post-slavery. You had communities that were formed. You had people who were trying to actually push the Black people forward, and they weren't looking for government to help. They weren't looking for handouts. They were looking to themselves. They were looking to build themselves. They were looking for ownership of properties, ownership of land, ownership of things. And a lot of these things actually came into fruition. Black Wall Street is not the only thing that came into fruition. There were communities all over the U.S. where Black businesses were owned. There were a lot of strides being made as far as control over education curriculums. For example, in I believe the 70s or 80s, you had the Brownsville Community Education Experiment. There's so many movements for self-determination, and we've made so many strides. One of the most depressing things you realize is that, back when Garvey and people were talking about do for yourself Black men, there were so many more businesses back then that were Black owned per capita than today. I wish I had the book. I think it's the a book. What is it called? Something like Black. Oh, I forget the name of the book. It was written by Dr. Juanza Kunjufu. But it's a book basically where he describes the fact that back then a lot of businesses were actually owned by blacks, to the point where today there's so much less. We have less ownership than we had when we were straight out of slavery. We were straight out of Jim Crow. That should be something that's alarming. When I hear people say, oh, we can't do for self, we can't build our own communities, we have to instead rely on the government. I mean, look at us, look at this, look at that. But we were doing for self out of slavery, like owning businesses, owning banks, owning things right out of slavery. So as much as reparations are certainly something we should fight for, certainly something we should demand and become politically organized for, don't think that we're not going to be able to pull together ourselves, pull together our minds, pull together our communities and ourselves just as brother and sister. Don't think that you need one to have the other. That's not true. In fact, I would say that unless we pull together and start doing for ourselves, start building our businesses, start building our communities the same way that people did before all this integration stuff started being the way that we do things, unless we start doing that, you're never going to get reparations. Because you're not going to have the political leverage unless you have the economic and the social power to make that argument. We see it happening right now. I know people don't want to admit it. It's okay. I'm okay with being ahead of the times when it comes and being the one who says things that people don't want to admit. But if you can see it, right, like the presidential candidates, yeah, they're being asked about reparations, but are they really in the point where they're like, well, we're going to endorse it against our political judgment, against our political will? No, there's only one. I forget the female running for president. She's the only one who's fully endorsed it. Other people said, well, we can consider looking at reparations, talking about it. But the fact is, if you want to have the pool that the communities like the Jewish community had when they were able to demand reparations from the United States government, despite the fact that they had nothing to do with World War II, you're not going to get that unless you're organized. You're not going to get that. When I mean organized, not just organized. We don't have to be uniform. We don't have to have uniformity, but we have to have an understanding that our interests must be in line. And for our interests to be in line, we have to build power among ourselves. So that's what it means to be organized. So back to what I'm saying, we're not in that position to make that argument. Now, back to the African Trade Association. Why is this relevant? Because this would be a great aspiration for us, that Africans in America, we get in the same target. We get on, what's those people say? Get on code. We get together, organize ourselves to where we have flourishing businesses, and we can, in a way, separate our interests from that of the U.S., and make the statement that we're going to join this free trade association. Now, does this mean, am I saying that they're going to necessarily let us in as of right now? I don't know. But if we were in that position, not even just with this association, but with other Caribbean countries, to say that, hey, we have an independent economy from the United States. We have businesses that are separate from the U.S. We have schools. We have banks. We have all these things. And we are ready to make a free trade agreement with others in the diaspora. That is the type of thing that we want to actually look forward to doing. So this is basically just to call and say that our people who are in the diaspora, as we see these movements being made, let's prepare ourselves to be in a position to where we can lobby those African trade associations to recognize us, to recognize Haiti, to recognize any of us in the diaspora who could also benefit from having that type of relationship. And these are things that we could aspire to, but most importantly, if we start changing our minds away from this idea that our salvation is in the United States government, is in the mainstream economy of the United States, instead of seeing it as being something that our salvation is in us being self-sufficient, in us actually being able to have a separate economy, like many other groups do. When I say separate economy, understand the Chinese, the Koreans, the Jews, everyone, they have their own way of networking among each other. Whether you're Jewish, whether you're some of our Caribbean communities, also African communities, all of them have their own internal networking. So when we're talking about a separate economy, we're talking about Black people having separate networks, separate institutions that can intermingle with each other and fight for each other, for us to have the same interest and be in line with each other. That's all. So that's what I have for this. As I stated, this is part 2, so if you didn't see part 1, you should go back. That's all I have for y'all today, though. I will see you all in another video.